The summer of 2024 was supposed to be my reset. After a grueling year teaching middle school in Boise, I needed to escape the fluorescent lights, the endless parent emails, and the suffocating monotony of grading papers. My plan was simple: a solo drive through the Pacific Northwest, chasing the kind of solitude you only find in places where cell service dies and the world feels untouched. I'd rented a beat-up Jeep Wrangler, packed a cooler with sandwiches and energy drinks, and mapped a route from Boise to the Oregon coast, weaving through the forgotten highways of Eastern Oregon. The open road, a curated playlist of moody indie tracks, and the promise of ocean air. It was exactly what I needed to feel human again. That be why the second night, I was deep in Malheur County, where the landscape is a patchwork of sagebrush and volcanic rock, the kind of place where the horizon stretches so far it feels like the earth is holding its breath. The sun had dipped below the ridge, painting the sky a bruised purple, and my headlights carved lonely arcs through the dark. The highway was a narrow ribbon of asphalt, flanked by endless scrubland, with no towns for miles. My phone had lost signal hours ago, and the GPS was glitching, stubbornly insisting I was driving through a blank void. I didn't mind. The isolation was the point. Around 11 p.m., I noticed my gas gauge hovering near empty. I hadn't seen a station since Jordan Valley, and the last thing I wanted was to be stranded out here with nothing but coyotes for company. I kept driving, scanning the horizon for any sign of civilization. Finally, a faint glow appeared in the distance, like a lone star fallen to earth. As I got closer, I saw it, a gas station, its neon sign stuttering desert fuel and faded blue letters. The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the Reagan era. Peeling paint, rusted pumps, and a single flickering light above the entrance. The lot was empty except for a dusty pickup truck parked at an odd angle, like someone had abandoned it in a hurry. I pulled up to the pump, the Jeep's engine ticking as it cooled. The air was heavy with the scent of diesel and something sharper, like burnt metal. I stepped out, stretching my legs, and glanced at the station. The windows were smudged with grime, but a faint light spilled through, illuminating rows of outdated snacks and a lone figure behind the counter. I swiped my card at the pump, but it beeped angrily, flashing "See cashier." Great. I grabbed my wallet and headed inside, the bell above the door letting out a weak jangle. Inside, the station was a time capsule of neglect. The linoleum was cracked, curling at the edges, and the shelves were stocked with off-brand chips and candy bars with faded wrappers. A fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly green glow. The clerk, a man in his late 50s, stood behind the counter, his face half hidden under a stained baseball cap. His skin was sallow, almost gray, and his eyes were too bright, like they were reflecting light that wasn't there. He didn't look up as I approached, just kept wiping the counter with a rag that looked dirtier than the surface. Pumps. Not taking my card, I said, keeping my tone friendly. "Can you turn it on?" He stopped wiping and looked at me, his gaze lingering a beat too long. "Sure thing," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Where you headed?" "Just passing through," I said, avoiding specifics. "Coast, eventually." He nodded slowly, punching something into the ancient register. "Long way to go alone. You got people waiting for you." The question caught me off guard, not because it was strange, but because of the way he said it, slow, deliberate, like he was fishing for something. "Yeah, friends," I lied, forcing a smile. "They're expecting me." He didn't respond, just kept staring, his fingers hovering over the register keys. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the cooler in the corner. I glanced at the door, suddenly aware of how far I was from anything familiar. "Pumps on," he said finally, handing me a receipt I hadn't asked for. "You should check your oil. Roads like these, you don't want to break down." "I'm good, thanks," I said, already backing toward the door. His eyes followed me, unblinking, and I felt a prickle at the base of my neck, like I was being watched by something more than just him. Outside, the night felt colder, the air heavier. I started the pump, the nozzle clicking rhythmically as gas flowed into the Jeep. I kept my back to the vehicle, scanning the lot. The pickup truck was still there, its cab dark, no sign of a driver. I told myself I was being paranoid. Too many true crime podcasts, too many late nights alone. But the feeling wouldn't shake. As the pump clicked off, I heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping, like someone tapping a finger against metal. It was coming from the pickup. I froze, my hand still on the nozzle. The sound stopped, then started again, faster this time, like a heartbeat picking up pace. I capped the tank and moved toward the driver's side, my steps quick but deliberate. That's when I saw it, a faint glow inside the pickup's cab, like a phone screen flickering on and off. No one was inside, at least not that I could see. I got into the Jeep, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out, my headlights swept across the station, catching the clerk standing at the window, motionless, watching me. I didn't look back again. The road stretched on, darker now, the stars swallowed by a low bank of clouds. I tried to focus on the music, but the playlist felt wrong, too upbeat for the knot in my stomach. About 20 minutes later, my CB radio, one of those old school ones the Jeep's previous owner had installed, crackled to life. I hadn't touched it, hadn't even known it worked. Static hissed, then a voice broke through, low and distorted, like it was coming from underwater. "Desert. Fuel to lone traveler. You still out there?" My blood went cold. I stared at the radio, its green display glowing faintly. The voice came again, clearer this time. "You didn't check your oil. Bad move." I fumbled for the volume knob, turning it down, but not off. My hands were shaking, and I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting headlights. There were none, just darkness. I told myself it was a prank, some bored trucker messing with me. But the clerk's face kept flashing in my mind, those two bright eyes, that deliberate stare that I drove faster, the Jeep's tires humming against the asphalt. The radio stayed silent, but the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing inside. The car. I passed a faded sign for a town called Vale, 15 miles away. If I could make it there, I'd find a motel, somewhere with people, lights, anything to break this suffocating quiet. Then the radio crackled again. "You're not alone. Out there," the voice said, slow and deliberate. "Check your mirrors." I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed not to. But my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw something. A shape in the back seat, just a shadow, gone when I blinked. My heart slammed against my ribs. I jerked the wheel, pulling onto the shoulder, and flipped on the interior light. The back seat was empty. Just my backpack and cooler, exactly where I'd left them. I sat there, breathing hard, the engine idling. The radio stayed silent, but the words echoed in my head. I checked the locks again, even though I knew they were secure. I was alone. I had to be. But the feeling of being watched clung to me, heavy as the desert air that I pulled back onto the highway, pushing the Jeep to its limit. Vale was closer now, its lights a faint promise on the horizon. I didn't stop until I reached a small motel. its vacancy sign glowing red against the night. The clerk, a tired woman in her 60s, barely looked up as she handed me a key. I parked right outside my room, dragged my stuff inside, and triple-checked the deadbolt. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind made me sit up, listening. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and pulled out my laptop, hoping to distract myself. That's when I remembered the dash cam I'd installed for the trip, a cheap thing I'd bought for insurance. It had been running the whole time, capturing everything from the driver's perspective that I plugged it into my laptop and rewound to. The gas station. The footage was grainy, the audio faint, but there I was, walking into the station, then back out to the pump. The clerk was visible through the window, standing still, watching. But then, just as I started the Jeep, the camera caught something else. A figure moving near the pickup truck, low to the ground, like they were crawling. It was quick, almost too fast to notice, but it was there. A person, or something like. One, slipping out of sight behind the truck that my stomach twisted. I paused the footage, zoomed in, but the image was too pixelated to make out details. I kept watching, frame by frame, until I reached the moment I pulled out of the lot. The clerk was still at the window, but the pickup's door was open now, just a crack. And in the shadows, barely visible, was a hand, gripping the edge of the door that I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse racing. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I packed up and drove straight to Vale's police station, a small brick building that looked more like a post office. I showed the officer the footage, explained the radio, the voice, the figure. He watched the video twice, his face unreadable, then leaned back in his chair. "That station's been closed for years," he said, scratching his jaw. "Owner died in 19. Place is locked up tight. Kids break in sometimes, but no one's running pumps out there." I stared at him. I was there. I bought gas. There was a clerk. He shrugged, not unkindly. "Could be squatters. We'll check it out. But that place hasn't had power since the last owner passed. No way those pumps are working." I left the station feeling like I'd been punched. The receipt was still in my wallet, crumpled but real, with desert fuel printed at the top and a timestamp, 11:07 p.m. I showed it to the officer, but he just shook his head, like it was a relic from another world that I didn't finish the trip. I drove home to Boise, taking the main highways, stopping only at crowded truck stops. The dash cam footage is still on my laptop, but I haven't watched it again. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I hear static in my head, like the ghost of that radio signal, and I can't stop checking my mirrors, waiting for a voice to tell me I'm not alone. The worst part? 2 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo of my Jeep, parked at that motel in Vale, taken from across the lot. The timestamp was 3:14 a.m., when I'd been awake, staring at the ceiling, convinced I was safe. Behind a locked door that I don't drive alone anymore. I don't trust the road, or the shadows that move just out of sight. And I don't know who, or what, was waiting for me at Desert Fuel, but I know they're still out there, somewhere in the dark, listening for the next signal. The fall of 2023 was a blur of deadlines and exhaustion. I'd been freelancing as a graphic designer in Denver, scraping by on gigs that paid just enough to keep my apartment and my ancient Subaru running. The hustle was relentless, and I was burning out, when a friend offered me her family's cabin. In northern New Mexico for a weekend, I jumped at the chance. A few days of quiet, no Wi-Fi, no clients, just me, a sketchbook, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. I packed light, some clothes, a thermos of coffee, and a vague plan to drive from Denver to Taos, cutting through the back roads to avoid the monotony of I-25. It was supposed to be a reset, a chance to breathe. The drive started out fine. The aspens were turning, their leaves a riot of gold against the evergreens, and the air through the cracked windows smelled like pine and earth. I left Denver at dusk, figuring I'd make it to the cabin by midnight. The route took me through small towns, Walsenburg, La Vida, before veering onto a state road that wound through the foothills. By 9 p.m., I was deep in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where the stars are so bright they feel like they're pressing down on you. My phone had one bar, then none, and the radio was just static, so I switched it off and let the hum of the engine keep me company. The road narrowed, flanked by dense forest on one side and a steep drop-off on the other. My headlights caught flashes of movement, deer eyes, maybe, or just branches swaying in the wind. I was tired but alert, sipping coffee to stay sharp. Around 10:30, I noticed the gas gauge dipping low. I hadn't seen a station since La Vida, and the map on my passenger seat was useless without a signal to confirm my location. I kept driving, hoping for a sign, a light, anything. That's when I saw it. A wooden sign, half hidden by overgrowth, reading Mile 47 Rest Area, 1 mile. It looked old, the paint chipped, but it was something. A rest area meant people, maybe a vending machine, maybe even a gas pump. A mile later, the rest area appeared, just a small gravel lot carved out of the forest. A single sodium lamp cast, a weak orange glow over a concrete picnic table and a rusted trash can. No buildings, no bathrooms, just the table and a faded sign that read, Rest Area, no overnight parking. There was one other vehicle, a black sedan, parked at the far edge of the lot, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. The engine was off, no lights, no movement. I pulled in, keeping my distance, and cut the engine. The silence was immediate, heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. I sat there for a moment, debating whether to nap or keep going. The coffee wasn't cutting it anymore, and my eyes were burning. I locked the doors, reclined the seat, and pulled a blanket over my lap. The plan was to rest for 20 minutes, then push on to Taos. I checked my phone, still no signal, and set a timer for 20 minutes. The last thing I saw before closing my eyes was the sedan, its silhouette blending into the trees. I don't know how long I was out. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes, but I woke to a sound, a low, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on glass. It was coming from the driver's side window. My heart lurched, and I sat up, the blanket sliding to the floor. The lot was still dark, the sedan still there, unchanged. But standing outside my window was a woman, maybe in her 30s, her face pale under the sodium light. She was wearing a thin jacket and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her expression was blank, almost vacant, but her eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. She tapped again, 3 slow knocks, then pointed toward the sedan. "Can you help me?" she asked, her voice muffled through the glass. It was soft, almost too soft, like she was whispering to herself. I didn't move. Something about her felt wrong, not threatening, exactly, but off, like a picture hung slightly. "Crooked, what's wrong?" I called, keeping the window up. "My car," she said, still pointing. "It won't start. I need a jump." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to stay put, but guilt gnawed at me. She was alone, it was late, and I'd want someone to help me if I were stuck. "Do you have cables?" I asked, my hand on the door handle but not opening it. She nodded, her face still blank. In my trunk. Please. I glanced at the sedan again. Still no movement, no lights. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, a heavy one I kept for emergencies, and cracked the door open, keeping the keys in the ignition. Stay there, I said. I'll check it out. She stepped back, her hands in her pockets, watching me as I approached the sedan. The air was colder now, sharp with the scent of pine and something else, like damp earth or decay. I shone the flashlight at the sedan's hood, looking for a latch, but the beam caught something else, a faint reflection in the driver's side window. For a second, I thought I saw another face, not hers, pressed against the glass from the inside. I blinked, and it was gone. I turned back to her. Pop the hood, I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. She didn't move, just kept staring, her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to Giles. Then she smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's open, she said. That I stepped closer, the gravel crunching under my boots. The sedan's hood was already up, just a crack, like someone had left it unlatched. I lifted it, the hinges creaking, and shone the flashlight inside. The battery was there, but the cables were frayed, the terminals crusted with corrosion. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I turned to tell her it was hopeless, but she was closer now, standing just a few feet away, silent. You shouldn't be out here alone, she said, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. This road's not right. I backed up, the flashlight, beam shaking in my hand. I'm fine, I said, trying to sound calm. Your car's not starting tonight. You should call for help. No signal, she said, taking a step closer. No one comes out here. My stomach twisted. I glanced at the sedan again, and that's when I saw it. The trunk was open now, just a sliver, and something was moving inside. Not a person, not exactly, but a shape, low and quick, like it was crawling. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted for my car, slamming the door and locking it as I fumbled with the keys. The woman didn't move, just stood there, watching. Her smile gone. I started the engine, the headlights flooding the lot. The sedan's trunk was closed now, like it had never been opened. She was still standing there, her hands still in her pockets. Her eyes locked on mine. I threw the car into reverse, the tires spitting gravel, and peeled onto the highway. My heart was pounding, my hands slick on the wheel. I didn't look back, but I felt her gaze on me, heavy as a hand on my shoulder. The road stretched on, darker now, the forest closing in. I kept driving, pushing the Subaru to its limit, the engine whining in protest. I didn't stop until I reached Taos, pulling into a brightly lit gas station with a 24-hour diner attached. I parked under a floodlight, my hands trembling as I locked the doors. The diner was nearly empty, just a tired waitress and a trucker nursing a coffee. I ordered a soda I didn't drink and sat in a booth, trying to piece together what had happened. That I kept replaying it. The woman's blank stare, the shape in the trunk, the way she'd said the road wasn't right. I checked my phone still. No signal, but I pulled out my sketchbook and started drawing what I'd seen, trying to make sense of it. The sedan, the woman, the lot. It all felt like a dream, but my flashlight was still in my hand, its weight grounding me. When I finally got to the cabin, I locked every door and window, checking them twice before collapsing onto the couch. I didn't sleep, just sat there, listening to the wind howl through the trees. In the morning, I drove to a local sheriff's office, a small outpost in Taos County. I told the deputy what had happened, showed him the sketch I'd made. He listened, his face neutral, then leaned back in his chair. That rest area's been closed since the 90s, he said. No power, no maintenance. Folks still pull over sometimes, but we don't patrol it. Too far out. I stared at him. There was a light, a sign, a car. He shrugged. Could have been a squatter, or kids messing around. We'll send someone to check, but there's not much out there. I left the station feeling hollow, like I'd been told I'd imagined my own fear. But I knew what I'd seen, and it wasn't kids. That night, I couldn't shake the image of the sedan's trunk, the way something had moved inside, quick and raw. I stayed at the cabin for 2 days, but the peace I'd come for was gone. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the trees felt like a warning. When I drove back to Denver, I took the main highway, stopping only at crowded truck stops. I kept my flashlight on the passenger seat, its weight a small comfort. A week later, I got an email from an unknown address. No subject, just a single line. You shouldn't have stopped. Attached was a photo of my Subaru, parked at the rest area, taken from the trees. The timestamp was 10:47 p.m., minutes before I'd woken up to the tapping. I don't know who took it. I don't know how they found me, but I don't drive those roads anymore. I don't stop at rest areas, and I don't trust the quiet of the mountains. Something's out there, waiting at mile 47, whispering in the dark, and I'm not going back to find out what it wants to. In the spring of 2025, I was chasing ghosts, not the supernatural kind, but the kind that live in memories, fragments of a life I'd left behind. I'd just turned 30, and the weight of a failed engagement, a stalled career, and a nagging sense of drift had me itching for something real. I decided to drive from Minneapolis to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where my family used to vacation when I was a kid. The plan was to revisit the old lighthouse on Lake Superior's shore, a place my dad used to call our summer beacon. I hadn't been back since I was 12, but I remembered the rocky cliffs, the endless water, and the way the lighthouse's beam cut through the fog like a promise. I needed that kind of clarity again. I packed my old Ford Escape with a sleeping bag, a cooler of snacks, and a notebook to jot down whatever came to mind. The drive was about 8 hours, mostly through Wisconsin's flatlands before the wild, jagged beauty of the Up took over. I left at dawn, the sky a pale gray, and by late afternoon, I was deep in the peninsula, where the roads twist through dense pine forests and the air smells of damp earth and lake water. My phone's GPS was spotty, but I didn't need it. I remembered the way, Highway 2 to M28, then a series of unmarked roads to the lighthouse. It was remote, barely maintained, more a relic than a tourist spot, but that was what I wanted. Solitude, not crowds to be. By 7 p.m., the sun was sinking, painting the lake a deep indigo. The road narrowed, gravel crunching under my tires, and the forest closed in, branches scraping the car like fingers. My headlights caught glimpses of the lake through the trees, its surface restless under a gathering wind. I was tired but wired. The kind of restless energy that comes from too much coffee and too many thoughts. The lighthouse was close now, maybe 10 miles, but the gas gauge was dipping low. I hadn't seen a station since Marquette, and the last thing I wanted was to get stuck out here with no one around. Then I saw it. A small, hand-painted sign nailed to a tree, reading Beacon Fuel, 2 miles. It looked makeshift, the letters uneven, but it was a lifeline. 2 miles later, the station appeared, a squat, cinder block building with a single pump and a flickering sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The lot was empty, the windows dark except for a faint glow from inside. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, with chipped paint and a rusted awning. I pulled in, the gravel popping under my tires, and parked by the pump. The air was cold, carrying the sharp tang of the lake, and the wind howled, making the pines sway like they were whispering secrets that I swiped my card at the pump. But it beeped, flashing error. I sighed, grabbed my wallet, and headed inside. The bell above the door gave a dull clang, and the smell hit me first. Mildew, stale cigarettes, and something metallic, like rust. The shelves were half empty, stocked with dusty cans of soda and off-brand chips. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Behind the counter stood a man, maybe in his 40s, with a gaunt face and eyes that looked too large for his skull. His flannel shirt was faded, the name tag pinned to it reading Cal in crooked letters. "Pumps down," he said before. I could speak, his voice flat, like he was reading a script. "Cash only." "Fine," I said, pulling out a 20. "Can you turn it on?" He nodded, moving slowly to the register, his fingers lingering on the keys. "Where you headed?" "Lighthouse. Up the road," I said, keeping it vague. "Just passing through." He paused, his eyes flicking up to meet mine. "That place ain't open to visitors no more. Been shut down years." "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "Just want to see it." He didn't smile back, just kept staring, his fingers still on the register. "Folks don't go there much. Not safe at night." The words landed like a stone in my gut. I shrugged, trying to keep it light. "I'll be quick." He punched in the transaction, the registers. Beep sharp in the quiet. "Check your tires," he said, handing me a receipt. "Road gets rough up there." I nodded, already backing toward the door, the weight of his gaze pressing into me. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the awning. I started the pump, the nozzle hissing as gas flowed into the tank. The lot felt too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you notice every sound. The creak of the sign, the rustle of leaves, the distant crash of waves. I glanced at the station window. Cal was there, standing motionless, watching me. As the pump clicked off, I heard something else, a low, rhythmic hum, like a generator, but softer, almost human. It was coming from the woods behind the station, where the trees swallowed the light. I capped the tank, my hands unsteady, and got into the car, locking the doors. The hum faded, but the feeling of being watched didn't. I started the engine and pulled out, my headlights sweeping across the station. Cal was still at the window, his face unreadable. The road to the lighthouse was worse than I remembered, pitted and uneven, the gravel spitting under my tires. The forest pressed closer, the pines blocking out the stars. My radio was off, but static crackled through the speakers anyway, faint and uneven, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I turned it off completely, focusing on the road. The lighthouse was close now, its silhouette visible against the sky, the beacon long since dark. Then the static came back, louder this time, and a voice broke through, soft and distorted. "You shouldn't be here," it said, the words slurring. "Together. Turn back." I slammed the radio off, my heart racing. The voice wasn't Cal's. It was higher, almost childlike, but wrong, like it was coming from somewhere deep and hollow. I checked the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights. Nothing, just darkness. I kept driving, the lighthouse. Growing closer, its weathered tower a stark outline against the lake. When I reached the lighthouse, I parked at the edge of the lot, a small clearing surrounded by cliffs and pines. The building was in worse shape than I remembered. Paint peeling, windows boarded, the door padlocked. The wind howled, carrying the lake's roar, and the air felt charged, like a storm was coming. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, the beam cutting through the fog that had started to roll in. I wasn't sure why I was here anymore, but something pulled me forward, like the lighthouse itself was calling me. The door's padlock was rusted, but it hung loose, like someone had pried it open. I pushed the door, and it creaked inward, revealing a spiral staircase coated in dust. The air inside was damp, heavy with the smell of mold and salt. I climbed the stairs, the flashlight beam bouncing off the walls, catching faded graffiti and cobwebs. At the top, the lantern room was empty, the beacon gone, just a hollow space with broken windows letting in the wind. That I stood there, staring out at the lake, trying to find the peace I'd come for. But the feeling of being watched was stronger. Now, like eyes boring into my back, I turned, shining the flashlight down the stairs. Nothing, just shadows. Then I heard it, a faint hum, like the one at the gas station, but closer, coming from below. I descended slowly, the stairs creaking, under my weight. At the bottom, I saw it, a door I hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a rusted cabinet, slightly ajar. That I pushed it open, the hinges screaming. Inside was a small room, cluttered with old equipment, ropes, lanterns, a cracked mirror. In the corner, a pile of blankets moved, just slightly, like something was breathing underneath. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hand. "Hello," I called, my voice barely a whisper. The blankets shifted again, and a figure sat up, a boy, maybe 10, his face pale, his eyes too large, like cows, but worse, like they didn't belong in his head. He didn't speak, just stared, his mouth twitching into a smile that wasn't a smile. The hum was louder now, coming from him or through him, like he was a speaker for something else. That I backed away, my back hitting the wall. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer, just stood, moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. The hum grew, vibrating in my chest, and I saw something behind him, shapes in the shadows, low and quick, like the thing at the gas station. I didn't wait. I ran, up the stairs, through the door, into the lot. The fog was thicker now, swallowing my car. I fumbled with my keys, the hum following me, louder, closer. That I got into the escape, locked the doors, and peeled out, the gravel flying. The lighthouse disappeared in the fog, but the hum didn't stop, even as I hit the highway. My radio stayed off, but the static was in my head now, and that voice, that childlike whisper, kept repeating, "You shouldn't be here." I drove straight to Marquette, stopping at a 24-hour diner, parking under the brightest light. I didn't sleep, just sat there, clutching my coffee, watching the lot. In the morning, I went to the local police station and told them everything. The gas station, the lighthouse, the boy. The officer, a grizzled man with tired eyes, listened without interrupting. "That lighthouse has been abandoned since '98. He said. "No one's been out there. No power, no access. The gas station's real, but it's barely open. Owner's a recluse, doesn't like visitors." I showed him the receipt from Beacon Fuel, the timestamp clear, 7:14 p.m. He frowned, turning it over in his hands. "We'll check it out," he said, but his tone was skeptical, like he'd heard stories like mine before. That I drove back to Minneapolis, taking the main roads, stopping only when I had to. The hum faded, but the boy's face stayed with me, those eyes, that smile. A month later, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a Polaroid of the lighthouse, taken at night, my car visible in the lot. In the foreground, barely visible in the fog, was a figure, a boy, staring at the camera, his eyes glowing like beacons that I don't go back to the up. I don't drive alone at night anymore, and I don't trust lighthouses or the things that wait inside them, humming in the dark, watching for someone to answer their call.